What makes Japan great is what makes Japan late. The attention to detail, never release anything before you're 100% sure. Perfection is the expectation, it's not the end goal. It's challenging from that perspective.
Welcome to the FocusCore podcast, where we dive deep into leadership, talent, and the evolving world of business in Japan to help you focus on your core business. Today, I'm really pleased to be welcoming a longtime friend, Paul Beddie, who's a global business development executive, a sustainability champion, and one of those rare leaders who can really talk through purpose and proposal without sounding dull. He's got a great 30-year career. He's delivered more than $100 million in profit and helped create over $1 billion in value with leading multicultural teams across 4 continents. He's advised CXOs and boards on digital transformation, energy transition, and global expansion. He's launched businesses in China. He's guided smart city innovation and taught some of Japan's top universities and built relationships at the highest levels of industry. And at his core, Paul is a connector of people, ideas, and possibilities, and he carries a simple North Star: do the right thing. It is a pleasure to welcome you. Good morning, Paul.
Thank you, David. Good morning to you. I want to meet this person you've been talking about.
You're a legend. It's been we had lunch a couple weeks ago, and it was just interesting just to thinking back about how long I've known of you, and then having met and had a little bit of the Colorado crossover as well. But maybe it'd be helpful for our listeners for you to kind of introduce us to your kind of path to Japan and how you got here.
Okay, well, I'm here by accident, basically.
Aren't we all?
Um, yeah, it all started off with getting a degree in international affairs. Area of concentration was Western Europe. Language was French. And somehow I got on the plane to Tokyo and spent the rest of my adult life in Japan. And in Asia. It's been about 35 years since I came out. And I came to Japan because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Didn't have a job, didn't have a visa, didn't have any language. Had a sofa, had a sofa to sleep on for a couple of weeks, which turned into 6 weeks, at which point they were like, please get out of our living room. Um, yeah, and then I eventually learned enough language to be dangerous. Landed a gig with a big Japanese engineering, construction engineering company, EPC company, the first foreigner that they'd hired into their global sales group, about 300 Japanese guys, me and one woman. So very typical Japan.
Yeah.
Hasn't changed too much.
Diversity.
So I had a Japanese salaryman experience for about 6.5, 7 years, lived in the company dormitory in Kawasaki,
Wow.
commuted into Tamachi every day. Um, and as soon as they found out that I had gotten engaged to a Japanese girl, I said, "Oh, maybe he's going to be here for a while." And the next thing I knew, I started flying all over the world representing this company. It was a great experience. Um, but after a while, I realized, I'm not Japanese. This probably isn't going to end the way I want it to end. So I made a jump and moved into management consulting and ended up got recruited by Deloitte. And the first day on the job was in Australia. Got recruited by the regional executives, showed up into Australia, and the first day on the job on like January the 5th or 7th or whatever it was, the Aussies are like, "Hey, who's the Yank? Why is he here?" Spent about 2.5 years with them, becoming a project management specialist. When I really wanted to do CRM, customer relationship management, but learned about management consulting, did it for the power sector, and then jumped into while down in Australia to Ernst& Young Consulting because they had a very strong CRM practice, and was with them for about a year, and they offered me an opportunity to come back to Japan as a full-on expat living in Minato-ku. So having gone from Nambusen and Kawasaki coming back the next time, living in Minatoko in Moto Azabu Sanchome was a little bit of a step up.
Nice way to do that.
Stayed with them for about 3.5 years. Really did CRM stuff in Japan. Worked with a number of Japanese companies and multinationals, and then got approached by PeopleSoft to run their CRM business across all of Asia. Um, I think the day I joined was the same day that Larry Ellison said, "Okay, we're going to buy PeopleSoft."
Mm,
Um, and so my real foray into the software world lasted about 16, 18 months.
mm.
Every quarter was had to be the quarter of our life, had to have the best numbers ever. And then, December 23rd, we all read about it in the Wall Street Journal. We've just been acquired.
Yeah.
Went back to consulting, built a financial services practice from scratch for a small boutique firm, covering all of East Asia. Um, you know, uh, it was a situation where the company I joined said, we're going to hire you as a principal. We've never really hired anybody at that level. We're going to give you a $3 million bogey. We've never seen anybody hit that yet in our company. And the first thing, you have a 6-month probation. 6 months in, I'd sold nothing. But I had a really strong pipeline. And within about 3 weeks of that milestone, we started closing stuff. And within the first 12 months, we did actually sell, invoice, and collect over $3 million worth of services.
Wow.
And so we're off to the races. We built a very successful financial services practice with India and the Philippines, providing a lot of the IT capability and people in Japan, in Hong Kong, in Singapore doing the delivery. And we got acquired by a company in at the end of 2011. That new company asked me to shift myself to Asia, to China rather, and become part of the executive for the region, which I did. Um, Ended up staying in Shanghai for about 9 years.
Hmm.
And about 3.5 years in, I decided I wanted a break from corporate and retooled myself into a sustainability guy, started my own company, which is the smartest thing you should do when you're in your late 40s with 3 kids about to go into American college.
Absolutely. Couldn't have done that.
My wife was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, it'll be no problem." Wasn't quite that blasé about it, but about 4 years later, I had an exit, which means I got out with my life. Bank account was a bit smaller, but it was an amazing experience, and it really tooled me into, the passion I have today for sustainability.
Mm.
I stayed in China for a few more years doing freelance consulting work. Was actually an interim country manager for a negotiation consultancy. And then my wife looked at me sometime in 2020 and said, "Our kids have left. They've all graduated high school. You don't speak the language. You've sold your company. What in the hell are we doing?" And by the way, you probably have the wrong passport to stay here much longer.
Mm.
And so late 2020, we came back to Japan. Um, and I started working with a large German software company in a really unusual, one-of-a-kind role, which was very interesting, very exciting. Didn't meet anybody in the company for real for about 16 months because of COVID. It was a really interesting way to
Yeah.
go into a big company. Um, Got caught up in the first IT post-COVID call, but very quickly was able to transition into the role that I have today with Capgemini, where I'm a global client partner for a number of very large Japan headquartered companies. Sorry, that's my short version, right?
That's great. That's awesome. What a odyssey from,
I think if
in
you
APAC, right?
yeah, I think if you heard it from my family's perspective, it'd be a lot different. It's like he was never here, he was never here, he was never here.
Huh. It- yeah, I mean, gets brings us to talking about kind of what leadership, and especially in Japan, because you've worked around the region, you've starting up in China, working in Australia as well. I mean, do you see like leaders, foreign leaders in Japan?
Mm.
What do they get wrong about Japan?
Um, I don't think it's changed much in the 35 years that I've been here. And it's the ones that don't become long-term residents like myself and yourself and a number of people that we know. I think they come to Japan, think we're going to change Japan. We're gonna make it go faster. They for 2,500 years they're just waiting for me to show up and we'll change it.
And you forget that there's a bit of arrogance when you think, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, we'll change that."
The speed, the concept of nemawashi, where you have to build the bridges and whatnot. You have to do that everywhere, but in Japan, it's critical. If you don't do it, the meeting, as you know, is just happening. The big meeting is happening because we've already had dozens of small meetings beforehand, and everybody's agreed what we're going to say. The meeting is not for anybody to put out any new ideas. The meeting is not out there for anyone to object. Or if they are, it's quite a scandal.
Mm,
It means you didn't align people correctly before the meeting.
yeah.
So I think, and that's very challenging because it's very different from China. It's very different from Australia. China has a little bit of that, but China is like, okay, great, let's do it. 30 days, come back, report, pass, fail. If you got 100 million customers in 30 days, okay, we'll fund you for the next thing. If you only got 100,000, it doesn't work, we'll shut it down.
Mm,
Japan is, no, let's study this for about 16, 18 months. We'll give you a little budget and see if you can get 5 customers. And then we'll try it again in half a year and see if we can get to 20 customers. And so the speed here is very different, at which people are willing to. And it's really interesting. When I came back to Japan after 9 years in China and started meeting some Japanese executives I'd never met before who were starting to deal with China, they were all just blown away at how their Chinese staff were running circles around their Japanese staff in terms
mm,
of how fast they moved and the way that they operated. But we are an island. We protect this island a lot. And I think we've had a digital transformation agency for nearly 25 years now.
yeah.
And at least we've got QR codes at restaurants so we can see the menu because
Put that into perspective. But in your introduction, you were saying, you were in financial services and you had this 6 month window to make $3 million, and I was
Mm.
just thinking, well, that's pretty aggressive, 6 months. So when you said,
Well, it was
it
a
took longer
year.
than
It
that,
was
I
a
know
year. I had a full
that's
year. They were generous.
I think that's fast in Japan, right? So I think
Um,
you're spot on that a lot of leaders come over to Japan thinking, yeah, this we've heard it's slow, and it's just because it's not driven like a someone on a team of horses is going to drive this sucker with a whip, and you
right.
just yeah, go for it. It's not going to work
It's
most
not
of the
gonna
time.
work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, we on the flip side, you also get Japan is described as slow but precise, right?
Uh, uh,
So leadership adaptions, what kind of leadership adaptions do you have to make here that surprised you?
what you just said reminds me of a catchy phrase. I heard a couple years ago. What makes Japan great is what makes Japan late.
Mm,
The attention to detail, never release anything before you're 100% sure. Perfection is the expectation, it's not the end goal. Um, it's challenging from that perspective. Sorry, go ask me again.
So, I mean, I guess the question is, how would you advise leaders coming into Japan then that are in this slower
Mm,
world, this precise world? What do they need to do to thrive and actually make progress and make things happen
right.
quickly?
It's you have to build the relationships. It is very much a relationship driven society in business. And if you build relationships with your teams, both up and down, and get them on board and share your vision and get them to buy into that vision, um, I think it'll go a long ways towards because I don't think that the average Japanese are there to try to thwart whatever
Mm,
initiatives are trying to happen. But there's the trust me moment doesn't come for many years into the relationship until many years into the relationship. So you have to really explain in great detail and multiple times what is your vision? What are you trying to achieve? What's in it for them? And money isn't necessarily the motivator in Japan that it is certainly in other countries. It's, I want to feel good about what I'm doing. I want to have pride in what we're doing. I want to be able to tell my wife or my husband that I'm proud to work for this company, and because we're doing things in a really high quality, good way. And I think, if you can manage to do that as a foreign executive in the first 180 days, and build those bridges, and that's really, really where you focus. I think the next 180 days, you can actually get a lot done.
Mm.
You have to really invest, and it's not a 90-day plan. Um, um, and show them the vision, show them you're committed and whatnot, and get the team to actually buy into the same vision, but explain over and over and over, and be ready to go into a level of detail that maybe you haven't even thought of. Because it's because it's such a high context society, a high context language, the level of detail that's required for people to really feel that, okay, I really understand this now, is astounding compared to other societies.
Mm. How elastic do you think you need to be on your vision?
Mm, I think you always need to be ready to pivot. Um, read the market signals. You definitely stay focused. Um, and but understand where can you give that level some flexibility.
Mm.
Um, but I don't think you want to say we're going to build a steam engine and then, well, we changed our mind. We're going to go build brackets for stereo speakers.
Yeah, I mean, because I imagine if you're a leader coming into Japan, or if you're managing leadership in Japan, and you've given the mandate to your leadership to explain this vision,
Mm.
and you have 180 days to make some changes, that I would imagine there needs to be lots of little chipping away
Well,
at the and movement around the edges on that.
180 days, nothing's going to change in 180
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
180 days is the buy-in period.
Mm.
Um, unless your ship is on fire and you're sinking and you can bring that level of urgency to people. Um, um, 100, the concept I've put out there, the 180 days, is to get just people bought into your vision. Then you start to deliver some change.
So let's dive in a little bit more specifically on sustainability.
Mm.
And how does that industry differ compared to other industries?
Sustainability, I think, is you if you look at it in a really long historical context, we all had to, everything was pretty sustainable until about 75 years to 100 years ago. And then industry started finding new ways to do things. Let's, man is better than nature on how to make things work. We
Mm.
can, let's replace natural fibers with synthetic fibers. And we've ended up in a situation where we've taken a perfectly good natural system that's worked pretty well for 4.5 billion years, or got it to its state where it is. It's probably worked well for about 500 million years. And in just a short period of time, we've really thrown a monkey, a wrench in the system. And sustainability now is, I think a lot of people misunderstand it as being a cost. I was at an event recently, and an executive in a Q&A session from a European bank got up and said, well, the reason sustainability is not successful is because it hasn't driven any profitability. And I think that's that the way short-termism
Mm.
of sustainability needs to drive profits is, it doesn't work that way. It will definitely drive long-term profit in a very solid way, but it doesn't drive quick profits.
Mm.
Um, but if you're not sustainable, if you're not looking at the environmental consequences of your business, and what you'll have just a massive impact on the environment around you. Japan lived in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There are lots of cases of pollution in Japan just being unbelievable, rivers being tainted, people
Mm.
getting hepatitis C. There was a major outbreak of hepatitis C in Japan because of go fast, go quick, low quality. Let's not really worry about what the long-term consequences are of what we're doing, the dioxins in the rivers and whatnot. And eventually they figured out, you know what, this is not sustainable. will kill everybody.
Mm.
And so they cleaned up. China's gone through the same thing in a much quicker cycle in the last 15 years. Um, but I think, sustainability is not about governance. It's not about ticking the box to be ESG compliant. It is looking at what is the impact you're having on nature? What's the impact you're having on the community that you live in? What's the impact that you're having on, that your products and services have on the users? Um, and, are you degrading the air? Are you degrading the water? Um, and we're pretty sure we know what the tipping points are. We're real close. We've passed a few of them already. We're real close on a number of others. The biggest thing we can probably focus on is to stop emitting so much carbon into the atmosphere through a fossil fuel based economy.
Mm.
Fossil fuels have been wonderful. They've given us an amazing, global economy. The material possessions that most of us have in the world, certainly in the developed countries, is beyond anything anyone could have imagined 100 years ago. Um,
When you
but
said
it's coming at a huge cost.
you said we're on the tipping point of a couple of areas. What talk more around that? What does that mean?
Um, the oceans are getting acidified. The fishing stocks are getting depleted. Although nature is really resilient. So if we stop, the thing that's really amazing is we've like for fishing stocks, they've identified that if they manage it differently from just all out, let's grab everything,
Mm.
that the fishing stocks will rebound within 10 years. So it's possible. Nature is incredibly resilient, but if
Mm.
you keep destroying it, if you keep ruining it, keep polluting it, it will eventually reach a point where it can no longer recover. And things like the CO2 levels in the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases. So CO2 is just basically the easy one to measure, but there's a whole bunch of different gases in the atmosphere that are having huge impacts on the greenhouse gas effect, or sorry, the greenhouse effect where the heat's getting trapped. And we are the idea of the 1.5 degree, that horse bolted from the barn actually a long time ago. Nobody
Mm.
wants it's just starting to be really admitted publicly. We're somewhere to be 3.5, 4 degrees higher C globally by the end of the century than we were pre-industrial revolution, which on the face of it doesn't sound like that's a lot, but it's huge. Um, and it's uneven the way that it gets spread around the planet. And the Earth has been that warm before, but it was hundreds of millions of years before humans were on it when it was that warm. And the nature systems aren't able to keep up with the speed at which we're changing things, because normally nature wants a couple 100,000 years to make that speed of level of change, and we're
Mm.
doing it in 100 to 150 years. Um, the amount of plastics in the ocean obviously is a huge issue. The microplastics,
Mm.
you know, it's but we're doing so many things right now, and it's all the impact we're having to nature.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, everything that we do comes from nature. I mean, all the buildings in the photo behind me, even though they're all man-made steel and concrete and glass and whatnot, we use natural products to create all that stuff.
Mm.
And so if we're really getting to the point where we've destroyed the natural supply chains, it doesn't end well for us at all.
Well, nature will be here at the end of the day. We might not.
Absolutely. And nature doesn't negotiate. It's like, fine, you want to raise the temperature? We'll raise the temperature.
What I mean, so we know that there's issues around sustainability. We know companies are saying publicly that they want to make changes. They, but then I'm skeptical, and I think, okay,
Mm,
well, yeah, Japan's cleaned up the air, but basically we moved our manufacturing to Thailand and we dirtied their waters. Or
right.
China's, destroying large portions of African, wildlands to be able to do manufacturing and such. Aren't
Mm.
we? Aren't countries just kind of that have the money, just saying, okay, well, we look good on the outside. We've just moved all our stuff behind the curtain.
Yeah, a lot of stuff's been exported around the world. I mean, all the recycled plastic in America that ends up on the beaches in Malaysia and Vietnam and whatnot. You know, all and great, world famous companies that have fantastic sustainability credentials.
Mm,
It's their rubbish that's showing up on the shores in Southeast Asia and in Africa.
yeah.
Um, and it's weird because, they are paying somebody to take it away and they're getting certified that it's been ethically cleaned and whatnot. And there's shady characters the further down into the supply chain you go, where it was just a lot easier to pocket the money and put it on a ship and send it on the other side of the planet and dump it,
Wow.
than properly. So how do you, the profit motive is one that is it's a systemic issue of, profit before anything else, and that's kind of where a lot of the world has gone. Is actually the problem,
Mm.
um, in my opinion. Profits are important. Um, but we've got ourselves into quite a pretzel knot here. All of our pension funds are based on 7 to 8% annual growth, um, and all of the pension funds are investing in things that probably are not things that we would think are really sustainable. Not everything, but the money going into petrochemical plants, the money going into new fossil fuel development, which the biggest concern is we continue to expand. We're not slowing it down. Uh,
Mm.
so, I think if there's a will, maximizing profit at all costs is a big part of our issue, of not being able to maintain a long-term sustainability. Um,
So, well, I mean, we know that there's issues. We know there's a problem. What do you now? This is where Paul comes in and brings in his clipboard and pen. What
let's
what do you do
let's
to advise these TSE listed companies? What's the
so
blind
so
spot that you go and
I think at the end of the day, most people want to do the right thing. Most people want to be sustainable, and it's something where it's a mindset, and you have to get the right KPIs, the right mindset into the operations of an organization. It has to sit in the supply chain and the procurement department. It needs to sit in the R&D department.
mm,
It needs to be in the sales department, in the marketing department. You can't outsource the sustainability to the CSR team or to, the six people sitting in the sustainability department. It doesn't work that way. Kind of like IT. If everybody relied on running their laptop on a couple of people in the IT department as opposed to them learning how to work the IT and work the software, um, it would never work.
mm,
And so it's this idea that everyone has to understand what are the impacts of the stuff that they're doing, of the products they're designing, of the companies they're deciding to work with. And if you take it holistically, you start to look at, okay, we can actually reduce our operating cost, OpEx. Uh, Potentially, you could reduce CapEx, but CapEx is not always, that easy. If you look at like power generation, the CapEx of a utility scale solar plant now is about equivalent to the annual OpEx of a fossil fuel plant.
wow.
Um, Now it varies from country to country because of the inputs and whatnot, but um, taking design thinking concepts, looking end to end in product development, if you're looking from the very beginning of how do we make this product recyclable, or how do you make the packaging such that it can degrade, and then what's the manufacturing process for that, and then what is if there's a recycling component that needs to happen at the end of life to bring it back, and potentially refurbish it, or so you could reuse it or take responsibility for the end to end. You get a very different business model and a very different outcome from what you have right now. Most of the externalities, of products that are out there right now sit with the public, while all the profits associated with it go to the private shareholders.
Mm,
Um, but it's a mindset. I think a lot of the senior executives in companies are really interested in trying to figure out how to do this. And at the same time, then their CFO or their chief of sales says, yes, but 6% growth this year.
yeah. Or the board. How do you? I mean, you're dealing with boards and
Uh,
getting them to and shareholders as well, right?
And it's quite it's a huge challenge because, if you slow down your growth for, a few years to focus on, okay, we're gonna retool our systems and whatnot to use, more natural products or source to different vendors where things may be a little bit more expensive because, something made out of a fossil fuel base is a point 1 penny and a natural one is 2 pennies.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get over that, to change the dynamics of where the profitability goes? Um, it's very challenging. And I don't think there's a perfect answer yet. And it comes down to what are the values of the organization? Is the company really committed to doing these things in a sustainable, ethical way, and in a way that doesn't destroy the environment that we live in? And so some hard decisions have to be made. But if the only lens you're going to look at is profitability, then you're never going to be long-term sustainable.
Um, uh, so I'm curious, tying this back into what we were talking about with, Japan having such a long history. You got 2,500 years where that people think on, and you know, we're in a place where actually you hear companies putting together 50-year plans.
Well, Mitsubishi Estate has a 100-year plan for Marunouchi. We're about 25 years into it. They're knocking down the next three or four dozen Soviet-style buildings right now to build up another crop of 30, 40-story towers.
So you would think that Japan is doing quite well within in the realm because historically with we tend to be very nature based in Japan, right? And
Mm,
trying to
mm.
unite with Japan. But from your point of view, how do you see Japan is in comparison with other, first world countries globally?
So on the issue of particularly around like CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, Japan is actually a bit behind. And it's recent history that has led them in this path of there's this huge dependence on fossil fuels for power.
Mm,
And that's primarily we're in the situation we're in because of what happened in 2011 with the earthquake, and the Fukushima nuclear disaster. And they obviously shut down pretty much all the nukes have been shut down, although I understand just in the last week or two that they're now talking about restarting some of them um,
mm,
at a commercial scale, but it's going to take 3 to 4 years to ramp them up. Um, but as a result of that, Japan had this great approach to let's really go big on renewables, on particularly on solar. The feed-in tariffs were very generous, but that lasted about 12, 18 months. And they said, you know what, we don't think we can get there fast enough. Let's double down on LNG. And LNG
mm.
is, whoever coined the term natural gas was a marketing genius because it's methane. It is methane, which is a highly, highly,
Yep.
you know, very severe greenhouse gas. It dissipates in 30 or 40 years, whereas carbon takes, hundreds of years to dissipate in the atmosphere. But it's very intense when it hits the atmosphere, causing the greenhouse effect. Um, but Japan, particularly on energy generation, is not moving fast enough in putting in renewable energy infrastructure. Offshore wind is starting to happen. Onshore wind is much easier because it's offshore wind is has many challenges because of all the infrastructure and the floating and the oceans and whatnot that you have to put in place, the ports, the docks.
Mm.
Japan's just getting started on that. There's lots of geothermal opportunities in Japan, but is it possible to make money in geothermal? That's still a big question mark after many years of trying. But there are, particularly on the power generation side, that's to me the biggest concern is that Japan is doubling down almost on fossil. And this idea that we'll get back to 30% nuclear by 2035 seems to be a complete pipe dream because combination of the public isn't on board. Um,
Mm.
the permitting and construction times to build these facilities is, you know, 15, 20 years. Um, and while I think nuclear has definitely a future, we still don't know what to do with the waste. when at the end, and so we still have waste that is radioactive for thousands of years. And that's the biggest downside. But we have to get away from the emissions, and that is Japan's biggest challenge, is that the source of most of the power here
Mm,
is coming from fossil fuels. The growth rate of renewable energies is only about 1% a year. Japan is about 21% of its power generation is coming from renewables. Places like the UK, China, quite clearly, UK is now over 50% renewable energy and on track to get to probably 60 to 70% by 2035, I think it is. China is building renewable energy at a pace that just befuddles the mind. They double their capacity nearly every year and building more than the rest of the world combined.
mm.
They're still also building more fossil, but it's almost like the fossil is now becoming the backup. And they're starting, their emissions are now starting. We've got about 2 years worth of flatlining data of emissions in China, and the economy continues to grow. So I think that they will get off. They will hit their 2060 goal, I think, of being net zero. I'm not
Wow.
sure anybody else will. Um,
What does that mean? I mean, for Japan and companies who are trying to build financial resilience, right? We keep on coming back to profitability. Um,
yeah,
we need to. I mean, some of this doubling down is based on political moves or
there's a
companies.
lot of political. There's a lot of powers that be that engineering companies, import companies, existing infrastructure, um, that does not want to change. And they have the ear of the government. They have the ear of the policymakers, and they're kind of putting up, why does it take 7 or 8 years to get renewable energy sites permitted in Japan?
Mm,
There's really no good reason. It could happen much quicker than that. But certain regulations get put in place to slow it down.
mm.
And that's being done, I think, by people who are supportive of the current system as it is, the business as usual. Um, so I think it could be done. Um, Somehow the political will is not there to make the big change, which is a shame because I think post 2011, Japan had a real opportunity to potentially become the renewable energy superpower of the world. There was a small window when it was there, and if they had spent the last 10, 15 years really just focused on renewable energy, they would have created whole new industries, in technologies out of Japan that they could then sell to the rest of the world. And if you look at what China's doing right now, that's really what they're doing.
Mm.
Um, every time Japan tries to sell a new LNG plant into Southeast Asia, the Malaysia or Thailand or whoever it is has to compare, well, we've got this offer from the Japanese, we've got this offer from the Chinese. Um, which way are we going to go? I think if you think long-term energy strategy, renewable energy is the way to go because you only have to make sure the sun is still on, and that's probably not going anywhere for a few generations. Um, enough power, solar power hits the surface of the earth in an hour to power everything we do as humanity for a year.
But yeah,
Um,
are these governments making that? I mean, you can sit here and make the logical decision. Are the governments making that decision? Because there's also the political
it comes
considerations
down to
and the
the geopolitical
yeah.
considerations. Who's 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 whose money is going to go into which bank account? I mean, that's a lot of it for sure. So getting there's definitely organizations that are trying to work at the government level to inform them of, this is what is going to happen if you sign up for a new fossil fuel plant, in terms of, you're going to have 20, 30, 40 years of having to import more fuel.
Mm,
Um, Whereas with a renewable energy, it's, once you've built it, your operating cost is basically the people that run it, and do the maintenance. And it's a much different, prospect. I think in Australia now, they were just talking a couple weeks ago of they're going to require the utilities to provide 3 hours of free energy every day because they've got so much renewable energy that's being generated. And if they put all the renewable energy into the grid, it collapses the price of energy. Um,
wow.
which is really, that's very anti-capitalist.
Right.
But it it really requires a systemic change in the way that we look at how does capitalism work and what is good really mean,
Mm,
and where, how do we all have a comfortable life? And I think we can all have a comfortable life being sustainable. But it means you need a big change in the system. So, um, are there companies that are going to be willing to reduce profit to some extent in the short term for longer term sustainability? Um, at the moment, I think the world is saying no. But it's in 30, 40 years, I mean, the sea level rise, the heat. I mean, Tokyo now is in the summer. People, I've got colleagues from India. They're like, I'm going back to Delhi because it's just too damn hot here.
yeah.
I was in Singapore in August. I was like, whoa, it's 4 or 5 degrees cooler in Singapore than it is in Tokyo. And we're only at 2025. We're not at 2050. We're not at 2060. And once these temperatures go up, you don't just go outside, switch the thermostat to bring them back down.
Mm.
So it's a type of problem that our we've not had to deal with in our lifetimes or in our as a species before, and so we're not really well equipped to deal with it.
So we put you in your wizard hat on, Paul, and we give you all the supreme power. What's if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing for corporate sustainability globally,
Mm.
what would it be?
I think it comes down to the power generation,
Mm,
and getting everybody off of the fossil fuel power generation.
mm,
And moved over to, because that'll have an immediate impact on emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. It also has an immediate impact on companies that are in that business, and it's very detrimental to them. But it creates whole new industries on the other side. Um, so I think that's the one thing if we could really change immediately. And this is the most contentious part of what's happening at the COP conferences. Is they've been unable so far to get fossil fuel even mentioned into the treaties that
mm,
they're signing.
yeah. Mm. So
Um,
I'd be switch gears because I'd
yes.
be negligent to ignore your experience and wisdom in leadership and
Mm,
career development, and I'd like to highlight that for listeners as well. And it was kind of just quickly run by in the intro where, describing your North Star as belief.
yes.
Talk more around that. How has that kind of guided your big career decisions?
So belief in yourself, belief that you can make an impact, belief that you can make the world better, have always been something that's motivated me. I sometimes have a challenge because another one of my strengths is responsibility.
Mm,
And sometimes I maybe misinterpret that of taking on too much responsibility that other people should be also taking on. Um, but I have found that if and I've seen this many times with other senior leaders as well. If there's a strong belief in that you're doing the right thing and that you can convince others to go there, things happen.
mm,
You can make things happen. Um, it's not, just because things aren't easy doesn't mean that they're not right to do and that they can't be have great outcomes in the end. But you know, I came to Japan at what was I, 24? Again, no job, no visa, no language. After like 6 months, I was like, what in the hell have I done?
mm,
I'm out of my mind. But eventually you just keep, what is it? Grit. You keep going forward. You keep trying to figure out a path through. Um, and eventually it starts to happen.
mm,
So keeping that belief, having some flexibility to you stay on the path, but maybe you need to shift a little bit here or there.
mm,
So belief has you know always been a key part of what I'm doing, and my belief that we can make the world a better place is what keeps me going.
mm,
People who understand, I'm definitely not a scientist, but understand what are the long-term impacts of what's happening. Um, if you can do that and still have hope, I mean, people that really understand sustainability are probably got to be the most positive people around because we can see the potential where it's going. It's like, no, we're going to fix this. Believe me, we can fix this.
Hmm. I love your belief because like in your career I love your career as a recruiter because most of the roles were
Hmm.
created for you. There was no job. It's like, okay, let's put Paul in and create this role.
Starting with
This
the
is
very first job that I got at when I came to Japan,
right.
there had been, the United States was having this huge trade war with the United States, and the chairman of the company that I ended up joining apparently gave a speech the spring before I joined saying we have to do something
Mm,
to appease the Americans, otherwise we're gonna we're gonna be in really big trouble. And lo and behold, 3 months later, there was apparently one manager who put his hand up and said, "I'm looking for somebody to help us. Let's see if we can find an American."
wow.
My resume was in the pile.
So, so why do these companies keep on inviting you in to take care, inviting you for these roles?
That's a great question. And it's a matter of timing, and getting the message to the right person. I have to say I've never had HR actually give me a job. It's usually after I've had conversations like, well, oh yeah, we need to tell HR we're talking and that we want to do
Yeah,
this.
it's brilliant. That's good hiring.
Because I'm not a business as usual guy. I don't have, a particularly deep background in like finance or accounting or supply chain or procurement. Um, I'm very much a liberal arts educated person, international affairs. I tend to see the big picture more than I do into the detail. And it's the idea, I think, of creating that vision, and figuring out, we're trying to do something we haven't done before. We're not sure how to do it. And we just met this crazy guy who said he's willing to try.
So,
And his basically his mandate is tell me what you want to achieve, and then let me go figure out how to do it.
mm, it's great. I know you teach young people and MBAs, and I think that's a valuable lesson for them to kind of think through that, there's I tell young people, especially, junior high, high school, the job you're going to get hasn't even been created yet.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I mean, who would have predicted you could be a drone driver or, that's,
Which when I was a kid, growing up in the 70s and early 80s, we were hearing that same message, and no one could have imagined that, the communicator that Scotty was using on Star Trek would become the smartphone.
right? Absolutely brilliant. Well, before I have you, I lose you today. I always like to do some fast fire
All right,
questions for you.
let's see how
So
we go.
let's see how you do.
Mm.
So, what's your favorite Japanese word that doesn't translate well?
Genki.
Oh, I like that one. For those, I remember when I came to Japan the first time. Um, there was my son was, I don't know, 2, and that
Mm.
was his big thing. He pulled his arms out, go Genki. It was I always it's a great word.
How do you, I mean, it's like they're feeling good, they're energetic.
Yeah,
Uh, Yankee.
it's a
It's like
kawaii word.
it doesn't have an English equivalent, I don't think.
Yeah. Strongest leadership book you've read recently?
Um, Actually, I'm not a big book reader, but the one I recently read is actually Strength to Strength, which
Hmm.
I recently read, which I've found it really clicked with me, as I think about, how do I become more strategic in what I'm doing, and let some people that are maybe their brains are a little bit faster and quicker now, keep the doing stuff going on.
It's awesome. The sustainability metric people should stop obsessing over.
ESG ratings.
The sustainability metric people should obsess over.
Annual reduction in CO2 emissions by your company.
That's awesome. Favorite Japanese food when you need comfort?
Zarusoba.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, that's a good one. AI, more hype or more hope?
Tough one. I think it's more hope. The hype is huge right now.
Hmm.
Um, it's gonna it will have profound impacts on the way the business is done, on it's having profound impacts on the current young generation of people leaving school looking for jobs. And nobody has yet figured out, so what do we do if we have permanent 20, 30% unemployment because people haven't been able to figure out, get a job at the entry level. Um, I think the hype is for sure. I mean, the number of chips, the number of data centers, um, it definitely feels like, we're at the tulip bubble.
Yeah. The habit that keeps you grounded.
I would say some exercise, either running through Komazawa Coin or beating up the water in my local swimming pool at my gym. But I'm feeling a little less grounded right now, so I'm not doing it enough.
Get out there and run. Best advice you've received.
Take some risks and just do it.
I love that one. Uh, your personal superpower in a meeting.
I think it's reading the room, and like understanding, that doesn't seem to be landing right. Maybe we got to change the direction where I'm taking the conversation or change a few things.
Hmm.
Hmm.
A country that surprised you most.
China. Um, China was much more open, much more innovative, much more, the future's so bright you got to wear shades moment. China just eats that up in spades. That's what Japan was like. That's what I felt it was like when I got here in 91, which,
Mm,
hindsight was kind of the end of the bubble.
yep.
Um, China is got no issues. Fail, get up, dust yourself off, go do it again. China doesn't really do that. Japan doesn't do that in the same kind of way. And they don't, even America doesn't do it in the way that China does.
Mm.
So that's, quite surprising.
And last question, if you weren't doing any of this, what would you be doing?
Pineapple farmer in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
No. Specifically, yeah, the Atlantic's too cold.
No,
But
that's too cold.
that's brilliant. Well, thank you, Paul. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
Um, you know, I don't think so. We've covered a lot of ground. I hope my views on sustainability are don't come across too negatively. There's definitely ways through. I'm a strong believer that there's a profitable path to everybody being sustainable, and it's something that we have to do.
Hmm,
Um, and it's finding the political will, the courage, really, to say, okay, we're going to do this.
that's great. Well, thank you so much, Paul. It's been a delight to chat with you.
Thank you very much for having me on, David. It's been a pleasure.
I'm doing the up, down, low, down, yeah.